Hello, this is Dr. Hanaa Assil, and this is Combined Science, paper 2-1 of June 2022. This was the first question. What is the outermost layer of an animal cell and a plant cell? Well, let's remember that the outer layer in an animal cell is the cell membrane. But in a plant cell, the outer layer is the cell wall. So my answer is B. The plant cell in the diagram is in a concentrated salt solution. Which arrow represents osmosis? If you remember, what is osmosis? Osmosis is the movement of water molecules from area of high water potential or high concentration of water or dilute solution to area of low water potential across a semi-permeable membrane. So where does this happen in the cell? Well, first of all, it's across a semi-permeable membrane, so it must be across the cell membrane. And then which arrow is the correct direction? Of course, arrow D shows the movement of water out of the cell because this is a cell that is in concentrated salt solution. So the water potential inside the cell is higher than outside, and the water will move out of the cell. The enzyme salivary amylase starts digesting starchy foods in the mouth. This stops when the food reaches the stomach. Now, why does this happen? Remember that the amylase in the mouth works at about around pH 7. When it goes into the stomach, the pH is around 1 or 2 because we have hydrochloric acid in the stomach to provide an acidic pH for the enzyme that is in the stomach. So when the amylase enters the stomach, of course, what happens is the enzyme becomes denatured, and that means the shape of the active site of the enzyme is altered by the low pH. Which foods are rich in carbohydrates? Well, you should know that eggs and meat are rich in proteins, while potatoes and rice are rich in carbohydrates. So I want 3 and 4. Which row is correct for a protease enzyme? First of all, you should remember that a protease enzyme is one that acts on protein. So this is something that breaks up protein. So my answer should be A or B. Now, when it breaks up proteins, does this happen in the stomach or in the pancreas, or it's secreted from the pancreas? Well, you should remember that in the stomach, yes, we have a protease that breaks down proteins. It breaks it up into polypeptides, and the end product is amino acids. While from the mouth or from the pancreas, we can have amylase, which breaks down starch to maltose, and we can have lipase that breaks up fat to fatty acids and glycerol, and we can actually have from the pancreas also a protease, which is trypsin, that breaks up proteins to amino acids. So out of my choices, the answer A is the correct. The diagram shows circulation of blood through the heart, lungs, and other organs. Which row gives a correct comparison of oxygen concentration in the blood in two of the numbered vessels? So if you look at the direction of blood flow from the organs to the heart, that's what he calls 3, and then from the heart to the lungs, that's 4. You should realize that 3 and 4 are carrying blood to the lungs, and this blood is low in oxygen, while the blood vessels bringing blood from the lungs will have a high concentration of oxygen. So which one is my answer? The 4 has low and 2 has higher oxygen concentration. Which row shows the features of an efficient gas exchange surface in mammals? Of course, when he talks about gas exchange surface in mammals, we're talking about the alveoli that are in the lungs. So what are the features of alveoli? Well, The alveoli wall has to be what? Thick or thin? It has to be thin. And I should have a lot of blood supply around the alveolus, and the alveoli have large surface area, so my answer is C. Physical activity affects our rate and depth of breathing. What happens during increased physical activity? So when you do exercise or when we play games, what happens to the rate of breathing and the depth of breathing? You should realize that after exercise, the rate of breathing increases, so that means you take more breaths per minute, and the depth of breathing increases. That means for each breath you take in more air. So actually after exercise, both rate of breathing and depth of breathing increase. Which responses occur as a result of adrenaline secretion? Remember we said in states of fight or fright or excitement or anxiety, the adrenal gland will secrete adrenaline. Now, what is the effect of adrenaline? We said one of the effects of adrenaline is that it makes the pupil dilate. That means that the pupil becomes wider. So the diameter of the pupil should increase, not decrease. Now, the effect of adrenaline on the breathing rate, well, it makes the person breathe faster. Pulse rate, yes, the pulse means the pumping of the heart increases. So my answer is B. A plant seedling is pinned horizontally onto a damp board inside a light-proof box. The diagram shows the seedling at the start of the experiment and after 72 hours. So remember that he has it in a light-proof box. That means we are not responding to light. It is dark inside. We're not responding to light. So when the root goes down and the shoot goes up, they are responding to what? They are both responding to gravity. So this is gravitropism. Remember that the root grows towards gravity and the shoot grows away from gravity. We say this is negative gravitropism. During sexual intercourse, the penis transfers sperm cells to the vagina. What is the pathway for the sperms from their site of production to the vagina? Of course, you should remember that the sperms are produced in the testis, then they go through the sperm duct, then through the urethra, and then they enter into the vagina. So my answer is B. The diagram shows part of a food web. Which animal is a quaternary consumer only? That means the fourth consumer only. So which one would you choose? If you look at locust, small bird, stoat, eagle, then the eagle is the quaternary or the fourth consumer. Remember that the grass, flowering plant, and tree are all producers, not consumers. In the process of eutrophication, what causes the increased growth of producers? What is eutrophication? Remember that eutrophication is what happens when we use too much fertilizers, and that means too much nitrates, and this goes into the rivers. It causes the algae to grow on the surface of the rivers, blocking the sunlight for the plants underneath. The plants underneath die, so the bacteria feed on them, increase in number, use up the dissolved oxygen, and the fish die from lack of oxygen. All of this is what we call eutrophication. Which row describes a chemical change? Remember that a chemical change is something in which a chemical reaction happens, so a new substance is produced. So which one applies to that? Remember that if you heat calcium carbonate and it gives carbon dioxide gas, this is producing a new substance, and that's a chemical change. If you look at all the other choices, it is still the same substance, but it is changing from one state to another. That is physical change. What describes a solvent? Remember, what's a solvent? If I'm dissolving, for example, copper sulfate in water, then the copper sulfate is the solute, the beaker is the water is the solvent, and when they dissolve, all of them, they form a solution. So what is a solvent? A solvent is the liquid in which a solid dissolves. The formula of sodium phosphate is this. So this is telling you that the valency of phosphate is 3. The formula of aluminium chloride is this. So this shows that the valency of aluminium is 3. Now, if I want to write the formula of aluminium phosphate, remember, if both of them have a valency of 3, then they cancel each other and we do not write 3 under any of them. So my answer is A. Magnesium reacts with dilute hydrochloric acid. Which statement explains why the rate of this reaction increases when concentration is increased? Remember, if I increase concentration, the rate increases. Now, why is that? This is because particles now are closer together and the particles collide more frequently. In which equation is the underlying substance acting as an oxidizing agent? Remember, the oxidizing agent is the one that has oxygen and gives it up to the other one. So it becomes reduced. So the oxidizing agent is the substance that becomes reduced. And remember again, when we're choosing oxidizing or reducing agents, we're looking at the substances before the arrow, not after the arrow. So the substances before the arrow, which are reactants, one of them should give up oxygen, so it is the oxidizing agent, and the other one should receive the oxygen, and that is the reducing agent. So which one is an oxidizing agent here? Of course, the zinc oxide. When it gives up oxygen and becomes zinc, it is acting as an oxidizing agent. 3 powders are added to dilute sulfuric acid. So I have magnesium as a metal added to sulfuric acid, or magnesium oxide, which is a base, added to acid, or magnesium carbonate added to acid. Now he's saying which of these produce water. You should remember that metal plus acid will give salt plus hydrogen. So magnesium will not produce water. So my answer is C or D. Now, a base with acid will give salt plus water. So this will give water. Any carbonate with acid will give carbon dioxide plus water. So my answer is C. Elements X, Y, and Z are in group 1 of the periodic table. Which row correctly identifies elements X, Y, and Z? Remember that going down group 1, the melting point decreases, the density increases. So looking at the values for melting point, the one with higher melting point is above in the group 1 in the periodic table. So Y is above Z in the periodic table. Now density, as we go down, the density increases. So that means X is actually down in the group 1. So which of these apply? So if you look at rubidium, we said X is at the bottom somewhere, so that is rubidium. Y would be sodium and Z is potassium. The results of 2 tests on substance Q are shown. Which cation is present in Q and what is gas R? Okay, which cation? That is from the test of sodium hydroxide. We said if I add sodium hydroxide to a solution and I get a green precipitate, is it iron 2 or iron 3? You should remember that it is iron 2. So my answer is A or B. Now he says when he added dilute hydrochloric acid, he got bubbles of a colorless gas that turns lime water milky. Which gas turns lime water milky? Carbon dioxide. So my answer is A. The equation for the reaction between zinc and iron 2 sulfate is shown. Which statements about this reaction is correct? Now he's saying zinc atoms give electrons to iron. Well, let's look. Zinc changed from zinc to zinc 2 plus with the zinc sulfate. So that means that it did give electrons, and the iron that was iron 2 plus changed into Fe. So that means that the zinc lost electrons and the iron gained electrons. So 1 is correct. Iron atoms have a greater tendency to form positive ions than zinc atoms. Remember that the one that has greater tendency to form positive ions is the more reactive metal. So is iron more reactive than zinc? No. If you remember the electrochemical series, zinc is more reactive than iron. Then the third one says zinc displaces iron because it is more reactive than iron. Yes, zinc is more reactive than iron, so it would displace it. So 1 and 3 are correct, so my answer is B. Iron is extracted from hematite in the blast furnace. Coke and hematite are added at the top of the blast furnace and hot air enters at the bottom. Which statements are correct? Do you remember the reactions that happen in the blast furnace? Well, statement 1 says coke burns to produce high temperatures. Yes, that is actually the first reaction that happens in the blast furnace. Carbon monoxide is formed by reaction of carbon with carbon dioxide. Yes, that's the second reaction that happens in the blast furnace, that the carbon dioxide that was formed from coke with oxygen will be reduced by reaction with carbon. So that is correct. Hematite contains iron 3 oxide, which is oxidized by carbon monoxide. No, actually the iron 3 oxide will be reduced by the carbon monoxide. We're going to remove the oxygen from iron 3 oxide, so it's going to be reduced, not oxidized. So this one is not right. The oxygen needed for combustion of coke comes from hematite. Where does the oxygen come from? Remember that we pass hot air at the bottom of the blast furnace. That's what provides the oxygen. So 4 is wrong. So which ones were correct? 1 and 2. Which statement about a chemical test for water is correct? You remember the chemical tests for water? Okay, we can either use anhydrous cobalt chloride or we could use anhydrous copper sulfate. So if I have anhydrous copper sulfate, this is copper sulfate, it is originally white. When I add water, it turns to blue. So actually anhydrous copper sulfate turns blue. That is my correct answer. While the cobalt chloride, when I add water, the cobalt chloride changes from blue to pink. So statements A and B are wrong. So my answer is C. Anhydrous copper sulfate turns blue. Alkenes are hydrocarbons that belong to the same homologous series. What are the general properties of a homologous series? Remember that a homologous series would have same general formula, same what? Same chemical properties. They will not have the same melting point. So it is 1 and 3. Methane, ethane, propane are all alkanes. Their formula are shown. Which statement is not correct? Again, remember, is he asking for which one is correct or which one is not correct? So he's saying all 3 compounds are hydrocarbons. Yes, all 3 compounds are hydrocarbons. Remember, hydrocarbons are the ones that are made up of carbon and hydrogen only. So this is right. He's looking for which one is not correct. All 3 compounds burn. Yes, remember, all alkanes and alkenes all burn. Methane is the main constituent of natural gas. Yes, you should know that natural gas is mainly methane. Propane burns completely to form carbon dioxide and hydrogen. No, remember that alkanes, when they burn in oxygen, they form carbon dioxide and water, not hydrogen. So this is the one that is not correct. Which substance rapidly turns aqueous bromine from orange to colorless. From orange to colorless. Remember, this was a test for what? You should remember this is test for alkene. So alkenes, when you add aqueous bromine or bromine water, it changes from orange to colorless. So this is for alkenes. Which statement about forces is always correct? A resultant force is needed to keep an object moving at constant speed? No. Remember, when we're looking at this, the resultant force, if it is constant speed, the resultant force is zero. Air resistance acting on an object falling in still air causes its speed to increase. No, actually it causes it to decrease. Friction on an object sliding along rough ground acts in the opposite direction to its motion. Yes, remember that friction is opposite to the direction of motion. No forces act on any object that's at rest. Not really. The forces are still acting, but there will be no net force, then they will be at rest. A table of mass 20 kilograms is supported on 4 legs. The area of contact between each leg and the ground is this. The value of gravitational field strength is this. How much pressure is exerted on the ground by each leg? So remember, if he says that the table has a mass of 20 kilograms and it is supported on 4 legs, that means that the mass on each leg is 5 kilograms. So you divide the 20 by 4. So we're talking about each leg. The mass that is on each leg is 5 kilograms. So you should know that force is weight, and weight is mg, the mass times gravitational field strength. So that means that my force is 50 newtons, and you should know that pressure is force over area. So this gives me a pressure of 50,000 Pascal. Please note the idea of a table supported on 4 legs, so the mass is divided by 4. The diagram shows an extension load spring for a spring which labeled point is the limit of proportionality. Remember that so long as the extension is with respect to the load is a straight line, then we have not reached the limit of proportionality. But once the graph starts to bend, then we have reached the limit of proportionality. A boy of mass 80 kilograms is running at a speed of 4 meters per second. What is his kinetic energy? Remember, kinetic energy is half mv squared. That means half times the mass times the speed to the power 2. So this comes out to be 640 joules. A mechanic cannot remove a large steel nut from a steel bolt because it is too tight. What does the mechanic do to help remove the nut? Remember that metals, if you heat them, they expand. So if I want to remove the nut, then I should heat the nut. It will expand and then I can remove. A metal rod is heated at one end. Thermal energy moves from the hotter end to the colder end. How do molecules and free electrons transfer energy along the rod? Remember that energy is transferred along metals by conduction. Now, how does conduction happen? The molecules pass kinetic energy to the neighboring molecules, and the electrons move from the hotter end to the colder end. So remember that it is the electrons that move, and the atoms just vibrate and pass their kinetic energy to the next molecule. Light travels at a speed of this. A radio station transmits radio waves at a frequency of this. What is the wavelength of the radio waves? How do we get wavelength? Wavelength is the speed over the frequency. So it is just simple division and you get 3.3 meters. Which region of the electromagnetic spectrum is used in remote controllers to control a television? Remember that all the different electromagnetic spectra can be used for different things. So radio waves are used in radio transmissions, microwaves are used in microwave ovens. Now, which one is used for remote control? It is the infrared. Remember that UV light is used to kill microorganisms. So it sterilizes, for example, the medical instruments. X-rays are used to make pictures of bones. The gamma rays are used to treat cancer, for example, by radioactive uh, rays. So my answer here is infrared. Where does sound travel at the greatest speed? Remember, does it travel faster in gas or liquid or solid? Remember that sound will travel faster in solids than liquids, than gases, and if it is in vacuum, actually sound cannot be transmitted at all in vacuums. So the one that transmits sound at greatest speed is a solid. Two balloons, X and Y, are suspended by insulating threads. They are each held near a negatively charged balloon. Again, I'm going to remind you, if the balloon has the same charge as negative, it will be repelled. If it is opposite charge, it will be attracted. So balloon X obviously is repelled. That means it is the same charge as negative, so it is negative. Balloon Y is attracted, that means it must be opposite, so it is a positively charged balloon. Okay, a circuit contains two lamps and a variable resistor. The resistance of the variable resistor is increased. What happens to the brightness of lamp 1 and what happens to the brightness of lamp 2? Remember that if we increase the resistance, there is less current, so actually both of them, their brightness will decrease. The diagram shows a circuit that includes 3 resistors, a battery, and 3 voltmeters. Which row gives the relationships between the currents and between the voltages? So where is I1, I2, I3? You can see that I1 is coming from the battery in series. So when it comes to I2 and I3, it actually breaks up into I2 and I3. So the total of I2 and I3 is equal to I1. So my answer is A or B. Then what about the voltages? Well, obviously also the addition of V2 and V3 will make up the total voltage in the battery, which is V1. So my answer is A. There is a current I in a resistor when there is a potential difference V across it. Which quantity is equal to IV? Do you remember the equations in physics? Which one is equal to IV? The charge? No, the charge is Q. This is equal to IT, not IV. The energy, you should remember, the energy is IVT. The power, yes, the power is equal to IV. Resistance is V over I, not IV, so my answer is C. Okay, thank you for listening to the video. I hope it was useful and please keep listening. Thank you.